want to start with something most people won't say out loud. We all say we want love, real love, deep love, the kind that lasts, the kind that feels safe. And I believe people mean it when they say it. But if you actually watch how people behave, not what they say, but what they do, most people aren't chasing love at all. They're chasing attachment. They want someone who stays, someone who checks in, someone who makes them feel like they're not going to be left. And I get it. That feels like love. Feels exactly like love. But it's not the same thing. Here's the difference in one line. Love doesn't require control. Attachment does. Love allows space. Attachment is terrified of it. Love is something you choose. Attachment is something you need. And if you don't understand that distinction, if you've been calling attachment love your whole life, you're going to keep wondering why it feels so heavy, why it feels like work, why it exhausts you. This is Without Permission. Unfiltered conversations about power, identity, masculinity, culture, sexuality, and the things most people aren't brave enough to say out loud. I'm Chris Willingham, and let's get into it. I want to be really precise about these two words before we go any further because they get conflated constantly. Love is a choice. Attachment is a dependency. That's the cleanest way I can put it. Love says, I'm choosing you. Attachment says, I need you. Love gives you room to breathe. Attachment is always trying to close the distance. Love is stable even when things are hard. Attachment is reactive. It shifts based on whether you feel secure in any given moment. And I want to be clear. Neither is some moral failure. Both are human. But when you confuse them, when you think you're loving someone and you're actually just attached to them, everything gets complicated. Here's why this confusion happens so easily. Attachment is intense. It's consuming. When you're in it, you feel everything at full volume. You think about the person constantly. You want their attention. When they're close, you feel amazing. When they pull back, even slightly, something in your chest tightens. That intensity, that ache, feels like depth. It feels like proof that something real is happening. But intensity is not the same as stability. Let me say that again. Intensity is not the same as stability. You can feel something incredibly intensely and still be in something that's falling apart. The feeling isn't evidence of health. What actually drives attachment isn't love, it's fear. Fear of being alone, fear of being abandoned, fear that you're somehow not enough. And if this person leaves, that confirms it. Fear of losing the one thing that makes you feel okay. So you don't choose freely. You hold on, not because of love, because letting go feels like losing the one thing keeping you grounded. That's worth sitting with. Because a lot of us have been in relationships where we stayed, not because we genuinely wanted to be there, but because the fear of leaving was louder than the desire to go. One of the hardest truths about real love is this: it requires space, not distance. Space. Space for you to be a full person. Space for them to be a full person. Space for different opinions, different moods, different needs, without it meaning something is wrong. Real love doesn't need constant reassurance to survive. You don't need to check in every hour to make sure it's still there. You don't need them to prove it to you repeatedly. Attachment does. Attachment needs constant feeding. This is where attachment starts showing its teeth, because attachment almost always drifts towards control. And I'm not talking about obvious dramatic control. I mean the subtle kind. The kinds you can barely see. Needing to know where they are. Wanting constant communication. Asking how they feel, what they're thinking, who they were with. Not out of curiosity, but out of anxiety. Because if you can get just enough information, you can manage the uncertainty. You can feel safe again. That's what control is really doing. It's not about the other person. It's about managing your own internal fear. And that's an important distinction. Let's talk about men specifically, because this plays out in a way most men won't admit, including me, honestly. Men often show up as detached, unbothered, self-sufficient. That's the mask a lot of us wear. But underneath it, attachment is still operating, just gets expressed a little differently. For men, it tends to come out as control, distance, avoidance, needing someone but never letting them see that. Because needing someone feels like vulnerability, and vulnerability has been coded as weakness for most of us since we were young. So instead of admitting attachment, men minimize it. They pretend it's not there. And then they wonder why their relationship feel hollow, why intimacy never quite lands, because you can't have real connection while you're simultaneously pretending you don't need it. For women, attachment tends to be more visible, and it gets expressed through investment. Emotional energy, time, attention, showing up consistently, being available, being the person who holds everything together. And when that investment isn't returned at the same level, the instinct is to give more. Try harder, be more present. Not because it's working, because the alternative, accepting that it's not mutual, is too painful to sit with. So the investment keeps going up, even when the return keeps going down. And I want to name this clearly. That's not a weakness. That's attachment trying to stabilize itself through effort. It makes complete sense. It also doesn't work. Here's where it gets real. When two people come into a relationship with different attachment patterns, one who leans in, one who pulls back, you get a very specific and painful dynamic. One person wants more closeness, the other needs more space. One moves towards, the other moves away. And neither one thinks they're the problem, because from inside their own experience, they're completely justified. The person leaning in feels ignored. The person pulling back feels suffocated. And the harder one pushes, the more the other retreats. This is one of the most common patterns in relationships, and it has almost nothing to do with love. It has everything to do with attachment styles colliding. When you call attachment love, your relationship feels heavy, demanding, like a constant negotiation, because you're not actually choosing each other. You're holding on to each other. And holding on requires effort, requires management. It requires work that love, real love, doesn't. Real love isn't effortless, but it doesn't feel like white knuckling your way through every week. I want you to stop for a second. Think about a relationship, past or present. Doesn't matter which one. When you were in it, did you feel calm? Or did you feel anxious more often than not? Because the answer to that question tells you more about what was actually happening than almost anything else. Calm is love's signature. Anxiety is attachment signature. I want to step back from the theory for a second because I think that gets abstract quickly. Let's talk about what this actually looks like day to day. Some people, when they feel something for someone, move towards it. They want more contact, more reassurance, more closeness. The connection feels good, and they want more of it. That's one pattern. Other people do the opposite. They feel something and they pull back. They need to process it alone. Distance feels safer than closeness. That's the other pattern. Neither one is pathological on its own. The problem is when these two patterns meet because they speak completely different emotional languages, and when neither person understands their own pattern, let alone their partners, it becomes a mess. What I just described has a name in relationship research: the pursue withdrawal cycle. And once you see it, you cannot unsee it. One person pursues, the other person withdraws. The more the pursuer pushes, the more the withdrawer retreats. The more the withdrawer retreats, the more anxious the pursuer becomes. So they push harder. And now you have a cycle feeding itself. Both people feel like victims of the other person's behavior. The pursuer feels rejected and invisible. The withdrawer feels suffocated and controlled. But neither one is actually addressing what's underneath all of it: their attachment pattern, their fear. I want to go somewhere a little uncomfortable here because this is real. A lot of people who say they want love consistently pick people who can't give it to them: emotionally unavailable, hot and cold, someone who keeps them guessing. And the easy answer is they have bad taste. But that's not it. Unavailability triggers attachment. When someone is inconsistent with you, you work harder. You think about them more, you invest more energy trying to crack the code. And that activation, that heightened state, feels like love. It feels like intensity, like chemistry, like something real. But what you're really experiencing is your nervous system in pursuit mode. That's not the same thing as connection. Attachment creates highs and lows. When the person shows up, everything is great. When they pull away, everything falls apart. That fluctuation keeps you constantly activated, constantly chasing the high, dreading the drop. That pattern gets mistaken for love because it's so intense. But here's what real love actually feels like: steady, consistent, not boring, but not a roller coaster either. And for a lot of people, steady feels foreign. It can even feel untrustworthy at first because they've only ever had the roller coaster, and calmness feels like something must be missing. Let's talk about jealousy for a second, because jealousy gets romanticized, treated like evidence that someone cares. He's jealous because he loves me. Jealousy isn't about love. Jealousy is about your sense of security. It's about fear of losing someone, fear of not being enough, fear of being replaced. And from that fear comes behavior. The questions, the checking, the testing, the needing constant reassurance that you're still chosen. None of that is love. All of it is attachment trying to stabilize itself through the other person. Here's something I want you to really understand. Reassurance feels good in the moment. Someone tells you they're not going anywhere and you relax. The anxiety settles, you feel okay again. But if attachment is what's driving you, that relief doesn't last. Within hours, sometimes minutes, the anxiety comes back. So you need more reassurance and more after that. This isn't because the person isn't reassuring you enough. It's because the source of the anxiety is inside you, not outside. No amount of external reassurance permanently fixes an internal wound. And that's one of the most important things I can say in this whole episode. When attachment goes far enough, it becomes dependency. And dependency means your emotional state is tied to someone else's behavior. If they're in a good mood, you're fine. If they're distant, you spiral. If they're off, distracted, stressed, short with you immediately start reading into it. What did I do? Are they pulling away? Is something wrong with us? Are they cheating? That's not love. That's handing someone the keys to your emotional stability. And no one should have that kind of power over you. No one. Not because they're untrustworthy, but because that's too much to put on another person and too much to lose control of yourself. For men especially, emotional dependency doesn't always look like clinging. More often it looks like distance, shutting down, not expressing what you feel, minimizing the relationship even to yourself, telling yourself you don't need it that much. You're fine on your own, because needing someone feels like losing control. But avoidance is still attachment. You're still organized around the fear. You're just running from it instead of running towards it. The fear is still in charge. On the other side, when someone overinvests, gives more and more energy, attention, and effort into a relationship that isn't reciprocated, that's not love either. That's attachment in survival mode. It feels necessary. It feels like what you're supposed to do, but what it actually is, an attempt to hold something together through sheer force of will. And the harder you try to hold it, often the more it slips. Let me pause here again. Do you lean in or pull away when you feel something real for someone? Do you seek reassurance? Need people to tell you you're okay? Or do you avoid vulnerability? keep people at arm's length, pretend you need less than they do. Both patterns are responses to fear, and neither one is going to get you where you want to go. A lot of what people call love is attachment. I'll just say it. It's not choosing someone, it's needing them. It's not genuine connection. It's dependency dressed up as devotion. It's the fear of losing them. The anxiety when they're not close. The need for their presence just to feel stable. I'm not saying that to make you feel bad. I'm saying it because I've been there. Because most people have. Because it's human. But we have to be honest about what it is before we can do anything about it. Attachment feels safer because it creates the illusion of control. If I stay close, I won't be caught off guard. If I check in constantly, I'll know where I stand. If I never let go, I can't lose them. If I control everything, I'll never get hurt. But that safety is borrowed. It's conditional on the other person's behavior. And anything that depends entirely on someone else can disappear in a moment. Because you can't control another person, no matter how hard you try. Now, here's what I want people to really hear, because this part gets misunderstood. Letting go of attachment is not the same as letting go of the relationship. You're not becoming cold. You're not checking out. You're shifting how you relate, from needing to choosing, from holding on to allowing, from trying to control the outcome to trusting the process. That shift is quiet. Doesn't feel dramatic, but it changes everything about how the relationships feels for you and for them. Real love is not always intense. I need people to hear that. Real love is not a constant state of electricity and emotional drama. Real love is steady. It's consistent. It's calm. It allows both people to be individuals. It doesn't require you to dissolve into each other. It gives space. And that space doesn't feel threatening. It feels right. And for someone who's only ever known attachment, real love can feel almost anticlimactic at first. It can feel too quiet, too easy, like something must be wrong. That's the addiction to intensity talking. That's not a red flag. That's withdrawal. Here's where I land on this. The work isn't finding the right person. The work is becoming someone who doesn't need another person to be okay. That means being able to sit in silence without anxiety creeping in. Being able to give someone space without reading it as rejection. Being able to trust, not because you have all the evidence, but because you've built enough internal stability that you're not constantly looking for proof. Nobody gives you that stability. You build it. And the more you build it, the less you need attachment, which paradoxically makes real love actually possible. When you start moving from attachment into love, when you actually do this work, your relationships change in ways you might not expect. You stop chasing. You stop running little tests to see if they really care. You stop needing people to prove themselves to you over and over and over. Instead, you observe. You choose consciously. You stay present without constantly managing the outcome. And ironically, that creates deeper connection, not less. Because you're actually there. You're not running the whole relationship through a filter of fear. Zoom out for a second. Culturally, we romanticize attachment. We call it passion, call it depth. We write songs about it. We make movies about the person who can't live without the other person, and we call that love. But intensity is not depth. Emotional highs are not stability. And that's why so many relationships feel powerful in the beginning and completely fall apart within a year. Because what they had wasn't love, it was attachment. And attachment doesn't have a foundation, it just has momentum. Here's the question I want you to actually sit with. Do you want to be chosen or do you want to be needed? Because those are not the same thing. And the honest answer to that question will tell you a lot about where you're actually showing up for in relationships and what you need to examine. This isn't a dramatic moment. There's no big decision you have to make right now, but there is a quiet one. Do you hold on or do you allow? Do you need or do you choose? Because love lives in one of those. Attachment lives in the other. And you don't get both at the same time. Most people say they want love, but when you actually watch what they're chasing, what they get anxious without, what they try to control, what they can't let go of, it's not love, it's attachment. And I'm not here to judge that. I'm here to name it. Because you can't move towards something real while you're still pretending the thing you have is it. Real love requires something most of us have to learn. The ability to connect without needing to control. The ability to stay without being driven by fear. The ability to choose someone freely every day. Not because you're terrified of what happens if you don't. That's the difference. I'm Chris Willingham, and this is Without Permission.